what is art? It seems like a straightforward enough question, but up until very recently, I had never given it a lot of thought. On December 23rd, 2 days before Christmas, I uploaded the very first of my Art Every Day series.
Hi!
And since then, I've been publishing Art Every Day on Instagram Reels and YouTube Shorts almost every day. And it's started me thinking, why did I choose to share the artists that I did? Why did I pick one artist instead of another? Did one feel more artistic than the other? Does art have some sort of universally applicable standard definition? Or were these works of art just art for me? In fact, some of the art that spoke to me the very most turned off other people the very most. Especially in relation to AI-generated images, is art inherently human, or is the only requirement some sort of creation process? Can robots or animals make just as much art, albeit not as skilled? I've gone on quite a bit of a journey the past month, and I'd like to share that journey with you, so that together we can try to figure out what is art. My very first model of art I picked up as a kid. I don't really know where it came from, and it stayed with me way longer than I realized. It was basically elitist. I was thought of a tall, thin gentleman with a sleek mustache, a beret and a cravat, smelling of bourbon and rose petals, arrogant, pompous, ridiculous. And so yeah, even though I spent a full summer writing books, even though I drew almost every day, even though I made short films all through high school, I never thought that me, a cute little kid with a bowl cut and cargo pants, could qualify as an artist, which is so sad. So obviously, this elitist, extremist view of art is not only super depressing, super gatekeeping and bleak, but also it's just not really true. Within the first 3 days of the show, I was interacting with extremely humble, charismatic, wonderful artists. So we threw that to the side, because obviously. So I spent the next week trying to come up with a definition, considering my viewers' comments, considering my takes on art, thinking about it mostly just in my own head. On January 2nd, I released a video on a pointillist cake decorator. I think it was the first Art Everyday video to really get some traction. And in that video, I presented my working definition of art, the application of skill to produce a work, usually eliciting ideas or emotions. Pretty damn good take for my first pass. Ironically though, I still felt that it was much too non-specific. I was going for more of a scientific definition here. And I got a lot of feedback from the viewers. One major thing: skill. I thought that I needed to include skill in my definition because obviously the more skill, the more intentional you can be with your art. I think skill helps you more clearly communicate with an audience, probably makes you more appealing to a broader audience. I think skill is pretty much a requirement for the viability of a professional career as an artist. But that's not what we're defining. We're defining art, generally. And when you start to think about it, what about an apprentice who's just starting out? They have virtually no skill, and yet would you say that the art they make in their first week isn't art? If it's not, then at what point do they cross that threshold and have finally earned the right to call their work art? Where is that line? That feels really arbitrary. Let's go even further. What about the artwork of a child? The crayon scribbles on a piece of paper aren't appealing to the general masses, but to the parent of that child, that piece of paper is worth more than all of the art in all of the museums on the face of the earth. So a child's unskilled scribbles and an apprentice's unskilled practice feel like they should be art. So I guess skill isn't a requirement for a universal definition of art then. I decided to branch out a little bit. Instead of just playing a guessing game and going in circles in my own echo chamber, I started looking at articles, magazines, other resources. I found a questionnaire in the Philosophy Now magazine where they asked their readers what is art. And one submission said something that felt obvious once I heard it, but I had never actually really considered it until I heard it. There must be something recognizable in the way of author-to-audience reception. I mean to say, there must be the recognition that something was made for an audience of some kind to receive, discuss, or enjoy. And this obviously makes sense. And then I realized something. Beginning of last year, I was going through some stuff, and I branched out. I intentionally branched out artistically to make some what I would call art that I purposefully never showed to anyone. So I made it for myself. So I suppose the author could be the audience, but if the author can be the audience, then why make this point in the first place? It kind of nullifies it. So maybe we don't need an intentional author-to-audience relationship. But that's kind of weird. So I was looking for a scientific, legalistic definition of art. I had tried a few definitions. Those definitions felt that they didn't hit the mark. But I still felt that it was impossible. I wanted a definition that was fairly specific and yet still universally applicable. I didn't present another definition on the show, but around this time in mid-January, I would probably say that this was my definition of art: the production of a beautiful or interesting work intended to uplift an audience with the purpose of communicating ideas or emotions. At this point, the show had gotten a lot of traction. I think in mid-January we hit about 750,000 views across roughly 20 videos, and there was a lot of comments, and the vast majority of people discussing art with me were saying basically the same thing, and it was way less specific than I was trying to be, and that was, art is expression. I thought it was so elegant, so beautiful, so simple, and most of all, it solved some of the problems that the ideas in my head about art were still creating. I still had it in my head that art had to be beautiful, but there's just so many exceptions to that rule. Immediately, I wouldn't say that Saturn eating his son is particularly beautiful. I had it in my head that art had to be uplifting. I wouldn't say that Saturn eating his son is particularly uplifting. I began to come to a few conclusions. But before I wrap things up for you and me, there's one more perspective I want to share. Jerry Saltz is the senior art critic and a columnist for New York Magazine. It just so happened that the day that I found out about him was the day that he was giving a talk at the Dallas Museum of Art. I absolutely loved it. The talk was brilliant. He's so fun to listen to. And his definition of art is probably one of the more nuanced, more poetic takes that I'd ever heard. It was also the most non-specific answer I'd gotten so far.
Art is using us to reproduce itself. Consciousness, art is consciousness taking pleasure in itself.
So, as it turns out, I still haven't found my scientific, legalistic definition for what is art. In fact, the harder I have tried to find it, the farther away from it I get. I went into this trying really hard to be objective and to avoid being relativistic about art. And my research isn't letting me do a very good job of it. Maybe there is a more scientific definition out there. Google and Wikipedia actually have some pretty dang good definitions. But my current conclusion is that I still don't know whether it's good art or bad art, whether it's skilled or unskilled, whether it's rich with meaning or devoid of any meaning at all. I guess it's art. Art is consciousness, having fun. Art is the act of expression. I might say that my definition of art is emotions in motion. Either way, I think young Jonah can rest easy, knowing that he really was an artist all along. And I think one thing is certain. Art is absolutely, deeply, fundamentally human. Take that, Dolly.